Hey folks, this week I talk with Bash only about yt-dlp. That is the cutting-edge YouTube and every other video service imaginable downloader. It's a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned. This is Floss Weekly, episode 827, recorded April 1st. yt-dlp. Sometimes you can't see the tail. Hey folks, it's time for Floss Weekly. That's the show about free, libre, and open source software. I'm your host, Jonathan Bennett, and we've got something a little different today. We're talking with Bash only. Yes, first name Bash, last name only, about yt-dlp. That is one of the YouTube downloaders. And as far as I can tell, it's sort of the premier YouTube downloader these days, since that old project, yt-dl, sort of went away or went on hiatus. There's a lot of history here. But we've got the right person to talk with about it. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on Mr. Bash, Mr. Only, Bash Only. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it is great to have you here. I'm excited. I know we've got at least one listener in the chat room that's excited to talk about yt-dlp because it's a tool that so many of us find ourselves using a lot for. The things I've been using it for recently is to download the HDR version of certain videos to be able to play it in MPV to do HDR testing. And, there's a whole bunch of those different, oddball use cases that you would never think of that people end up using tools like this one in particular for. That's got to be kind of surprising, isn't it? Do you have kind of a line to the way people use it? You get told stories?
I came into the project in 2022. Mm-hmm. And it was forked from yt-dl, which we can get into later. But, it's been around for over a decade, in one form or another. And it supports so many sites that every week there's, some new issue reported of a site that I didn't even know we supported. And then I find out thousands of people use yt-dlp just for that site. Mm-hmm. And I had never even heard of it before. So it really is sort of like the Swiss Army knife of downloading.
Yes. Which is interesting because I think it's primarily based on FFmpeg, which is the Swiss Army knife of anything related with media, right?
It uses FFmpeg.
It's one of the libraries. Right. That's fair.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with the elephant in the room then. And I got permission beforehand to ask this. What is kind of the primary reason that you are Mr. Bash only today and only a logo and not going by your real name on the internet and putting your picture out there like some of us have chosen to? What's behind that decision?
I mean, who says Bash only isn't my legal name?
It's on here's my social security card. It's on the driver's license. That's Mr. Only to you.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about, PowerShell only, but it didn't really have the same ring to it.
Oh.
But,
it's
and I don't think I would agree with that name. But, yeah, I just don't really want my name out there for reasons. Mm-hmm. If you look at what happened to yt-dl about 5 years ago, there are people that want to take this project down, mm-hmm. and I just don't know what angle they're going to come at that from. Right. So just to protect myself, I just, rather stay semi-anonymous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to be served with paperwork if your real name and your address isn't out there anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about kind of the origin story of yt-dlp. Honestly, I did not know for sure that it was a fork of yt-dl. But what's the history there? What was the kind of the original problem that somebody wanted to solve and the original project got started?
I think the original intent with it was to sort of create a digital VCR. And by that, I don't mean, like a DVR You know, a DVR is owned by, you know, your service provider. You don't actually own the content. You know, it's encrypted. Digital VCR is, you know, you see a video on the internet, you can record it, you can watch it offline, you can, you know, use it for personal use. And I think with video streaming becoming more and more complex, that had become impossible without a tool like yt-dlp.
That's an interesting analogy too. This is something I was thinking about in preparing for the show. You know, there's got to be legal questions around doing this. You know, can you download videos? Let's just take YouTube. Like, the question has to be, can you legally download videos from YouTube? And I think the VHS player is a really good analogy, because here in the United States, we had a Supreme Court case about this. I mean, Mr. Rogers went and testified about this, right? That it makes sense to be able to, and the term they use is time shifting, right? That's the official term for what we do here. We time shift things. You take it and you make a local copy of it so you can watch it at another time. You can watch it repeatedly if you want to, and that's pretty apt for what, at least, you know, as far as what I do with it, with yt-dlp and previously with YouTube DL. You get a local copy of it so you can watch it whenever you want to. But that's sort of been disputed over the years, hasn't it? By maybe Google to some extent, but other people like the RIAA. Not everybody shares that same legal theory, do they?
Well, the RIAA, they have their own view on this issue. And, you know, GitHub apparently disagrees with the RIAA,
right?
Because they reinstated yt-dlp. I think I'm trying to be careful with my words here.
Sure. So we are not lawyers, right? Neither of us have legal degrees, as far as I know. Besh only may have a legal degree and just isn't telling anybody. I certainly do not. So this is not legal advice. This is us being internet lawyers based on what we can read.
Right. So essentially, the way I view it is, you know, your web browser visits a website, it streams the video, you are streamed the content. You receive the data of the video. It's just not viewable outside of your web browser.
Right.
What tools like yt-dlp and yt-dlp do is they act essentially like a web browser. The way that they interact with the websites is they basically recreate everything the browser does, but then it saves it to your hard disk instead of, you know, just an ephemeral stream. So I don't think, you know, what the RIA said in the DMCA takedown notice for yt-dlp, I don't think that applies here, because what yt-dlp was doing really wasn't anything different than what your web browser is doing.
Right. And so there's and I think this was one of the things that, like, the RIAA got totally wrong. They talked about DRM, and when I looked into it at the time, it was the case that yt-dlp, and I'm assuming this is the case with yt-dlp as well, explicitly and intentionally does not break DRM. Isn't that accurate?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. If a website only serves DRM content, then yt-dlp doesn't support it. Yeah. And, you know, if there are DRM protected formats offered by a website, yt-dlp does not download those. So we deliberately avoid anything DRM protected because that would be unquestionably illegal.
Yeah. Does YouTube still recommend that, like, yt-dlp for archiving? That was the funny thing at the time when it got taken down. There was still, like, active YouTube documentation saying, you know, if you need to download a copy of your video, here's this great command line tool that you can use.
I actually wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, that was part of the document, part of the argument, the kind of like the counter argument people made about YouTube DL, and it's like, look, Google, here's your own documentation where you tell people that this is the tool to use to do downloads. It was wild. It was a wild time.
I'll have to look into that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I'll see if I can go back and find some of those sources. Okay, so lots of directions I could potentially go here, but I'm real curious about the fork. So how did we get from YouTube DL, and it got the takedown notice, and then eventually got reinstated, to now it got forked to yt-dlp? And as far as I can tell, like if you go to install things in, say, Fedora, yt-dlp is the one that's available, not YouTube DL. And in doing the prep for the show, I was kind of surprised when I went back and saw that YouTube DL does actually have a little bit of activity back in its distro, or in its GitHub again. But what led to the fork, and what led to where we're at now?
Sure. So, well, YouTube DL started, I think, sometime in the early 2010s. I think it might have been 2010 even. And it started out as just YouTube as a simple downloading tool. Mm-hmm. And then, the scope started expanding. It supported more sites, and more and more features were added. Mm-hmm. More maintainers were added on. And I think the original maintainers sort of bit off more than they could chew, maybe. There was a lot of churn through the maintainers, right. And the maintainers before the takedown, I think they were understandably overwhelmed by the sheer volume of issues and pull requests mm-hmm. that they had on their tracker. Even I'm overwhelmed with what yt-dlp has, and that's a fraction of what YouTube DL had at the time. Mm-hmm. And they weren't merging pull requests. They had standards, which was good.
Yeah.
They had high standards for code quality and coding conventions and whatever. Mm-hmm. But stuff wasn't getting merged. So then the first significant fork from YouTube DL was called YouTube DLC. And that happened, I think, a few months before the takedown. And basically, the idea was it'll be YouTube DL, except we'll merge the pull requests that should be merged mm-hmm. that aren't getting merged. And then the takedown happened a few months after that. I think it was October, November 2020.
Sounds about right.
And so when YouTube DL was taken down, all of its forks were also taken down. Anything that was marked as forked from YouTube DL mm-hmm. also got taken down. So then YouTube DLC, they started a new repository called yt-dlc, which was to get around
mm-hmm.
the forking problem.
Yeah.
And then I think the maintainer of yt-dlc eventually got burned out, or there was, other life priorities there.
Sure.
And so then, this is actually the first time I've had to say his name out loud. So I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it right here, but Pukandan,
mm-hmm.
Pukandan, he, the torch was passed to him, and he started yt-dlp, which the P in yt-dlp is his name. So
yeah.
It's yeah. And that's basically how we got here, where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a
so YouTube.
Go ahead.
YouTube DL still does exist. So after the reinstatement, development had still pretty much frozen. The maintainers weren't really doing anything, and it's understandable. They were already overwhelmed, and then they got hit with this, legal nonsense.
Yeah,
and
sort of sours you wanting to work on the project anymore.
Yeah, who wouldn't be burned out at that point? So, they basically removed themselves from the project, and the reins were handed over to a new maintainer, and he's pretty much just been going it alone ever since. So development is slow over at yt-dlp, but YouTube downloading is still getting fixed, updated. If you use the master branch of yt-dlp, it still works. There just hasn't been a proper release since, I think, 2021. So that's why it's no longer in package repositories, and the version you download with pip doesn't work. But if you run from source, or you build it yourself, it still works.
Yeah, interesting stuff. So what is it like? Are you the sole maintainer of yt-dlp, or do you have a group of people that work with you on it?
Oh no, I'm not the sole maintainer. I would lose my mind if I was the sole maintainer.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a team of us. There's about 5 or 6 of us, depending on who's active at any given moment. And it's sort of a democracy. There's not really a leader right now. Okay. We all just sort of, go by consensus and, work together.
Yeah. What's it like being part of that team? Like how crazy is it? How many sites do you support, and how crazy is it to try to stay on top of it?
To be honest with you, I don't even know how many sites we support. I know we have over 1,000 modules for extractors.
Oh my.
But then each of those modules can support more than one site. And then yt-dlp also has what's called a generic extractor, which can be used on any site we don't support, and it looks for generic embedding techniques in the web page to see if there's any video or audio that can be extracted. So it's thousands of sites, and I couldn't tell you the exact number.
It's just drinking from the fire hose all the time then, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know if you've looked at our issue tracker, but I think we're up to 1.5K. And most of those are, this site's broken. Can you support this site? And it's fun.
Yeah. Do you get any support from anywhere? Does anybody have a Patreon account, or does YouTube give you any money to make this work?
Oh yeah, YouTube funds us all the way.
Got those big YouTube Google bucks.
Yeah. I don't even work. YouTube just, funds my lifestyle.
Oh.
No. We have a donations page on our GitHub that you can check out. I don't accept donations just because I don't, again, I don't want to de-anonymize myself, or I want to avoid that as much as possible.
I was just thinking about that. There might be some legal ramifications for taking payment for the work.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So why, to get into a little bit more technical question, why is this so hard? Like, okay, so I remember years and years ago, back when everything was Flash video, somebody came up with this. I don't remember if it was a browser plugin or it ran on Windows. I'm like, this was like 20 years ago at this point. Somebody had this little tool that would watch your network connection for incoming Flash Shockwave video files, and when it saw one, it would just download it right off the wire. We've come a very long ways since then, I know. But why is this such a hard problem? Why isn't there just one extension that works on all of the sites?
Well, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Yeah, back then, I think that was probably around like 2007, 2010, somewhere around that time range. Streaming video was mostly just like an FLV file or an MP4 file
Mm-hmm.
or something that you could just, find the URL and download it. And so for a browser extension to do that, it was simple. And then, then there was HLS, Dash, and, YouTube is experimenting with its own new protocol.
What fun.
And now, you can't just download a file anymore. You need FFmpeg. You need, something that can stitch together the segments, something that can, even find the URLs of the segments now, parse the Dash manifest and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Is there quite a bit of churn? Like, does YouTube constantly change stuff to where you guys have to go in and refiddle with whatever? I mean, I don't even know, honestly, like what is the process for downloading a YouTube video? You mentioned that you kind of have to act like a browser. So do you go and grab some huge obfuscated JavaScript file and try to deobfuscate it and run through it? And like, what does that process even look like?
It's similar to what you described. So to answer the first question about breakage and churn, it depends, I guess, on how upset Google is about people downloading and bypassing their ads at any given moment. Like I would say about 2 years ago, YouTube downloading was pretty stable. Mm-hmm. It was only every few months something broke and we'd have to fix it. I think for about the past year now, it's been a weekly struggle. Something has been breaking at least every 2 weeks, if not every few days. We have done about, I think, 5 releases just in March, just to fix YouTube support. So then to get into the second part of your question about how YouTube extraction works, there's a lot of steps to it. And it does involve JavaScript, which has been the problem this month.
One might argue that JavaScript is always the problem, but that aside.
Yeah. It's sort of me and the maintainers. Some of the maintainers have a phrase called JavaScript hell, which is what we're in when this happens.
Yeah.
So there's a JavaScript player file that basically, that runs the whole operation when you're watching a video on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And within that file, there's some functions used to descramble query parameter that you need in order to actually access the video stream. Without it, you'll get a 403 error, or, in the past you would get throttled so that it was basically unwatchable or undownloadable. I'm
familiar with both of those problems.
Yeah. But now, then, I think about 6 to 8 months ago, they changed it. So now you just get a 403. You can't watch or download anything unless you scramble this query parameter properly. Mm-hmm. And for a while, the player JavaScript was stable. And then about a year ago, they started changing it very frequently. And they would try new obfuscation techniques. They would, recently they added an array that has all the strings in it. So you can't find the function by searching for the strings, because yt-dlp is written in Python. We don't use JavaScript. So, we don't have access to an AST or anything like that. We just, we essentially first parse it with regex.
Okay.
So we find the function names like that, and then we have our own little JavaScript interpreter module,
You built a JavaScript parser in Python.
Yeah, well, it's very primitive.
Right.
It just interprets what it needs to interpret,
Sure.
and it returns a Python function. So that's been breaking all the time. But yeah, well, there's two parameters like that that need to be decoded. Anyways, I mean, does that answer your question? Do you want me to get into more technical details?
No, I think so. I think that pretty much gets us into the ballpark. Yes, I remember when everything was throttled to be very slow, and so if you had a video you wanted to test something with, you would start it and then go to bed for the night and hope that it didn't time out and you got it by the morning time. It was very reminiscent of using the internet 25, 30 years ago, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, fun times. There are some other projects. One in particular that I know of that's kind of in this same space is SmartTube. And that's a replacement YouTube player for like Android TV. Is that something you're aware of? And is there any cross-pollination? You guys are obviously solving some of the same problems.
I don't know much about SmartTube off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't keep up with many of the other projects. There's a few of them that I do keep up with because they help us out quite a bit. There's YouTube.js, which is sort of like the reference implementation for all things having to do with the YouTube API.
Right.
And I'm very aware of that, and I watch their changes and everything. But I'm not that familiar with SmartTube.
One of our live listeners, Mashed Potato, points out that you may have similar problems to NewPipe as well, and that's another app, that's an Android app in particular that I'm aware of. I never got it to work for me, but that's fine.
Yeah, NewPipe. I'm aware of NewPipe, and they help us out too. That's a good project. I believe it's an Android project.
Yes, I think so. I shall have to try this one again. Last time I tried it, it just did not work for me at all. But
yeah, I mean, they're having the similar kinds of problems that we're having.
Right.
They don't really have to deal with the JavaScript part of it that much because it's the Android side of things, but the Android side of things, it has its own set of problems. So,
of course.
Yeah.
Inevitably. Okay, so surely your career path, your education path, you studied software development or computer science, right? And that's what your day job is? That's how you're so good at this?
No. Nope. I did not go to school for computer science, software engineering, any of that. My real job has nothing to do with this. I'm just a pure hobby developer and pretty much self-taught.
It amazes. I am basically in that same boat. I didn't even finish college. It amazes me how many people, particularly in the open source world, although in corporate world in some cases too, sort of took that same path. It's like we didn't go to college for it. We found it, maybe sometimes in high school, some of us earlier than that, some of us later than that. But just, it's like, oh, this is the thing that I want to do. Maybe not for a job, but I won't ever really be able to get away from this. Like writing code for some project somewhere. It's just part of who we are. I find that real fascinating that that's such a common story.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was a huge nerd. I would write my own web pages in Notepad, write HTML by hand and JavaScript, and I started out writing batch files, and I didn't really keep up with that much. I wasn't like an early adopter of Linux or anything like that. And then, I had, sort of a busy time in my 20s, and then life slowed down after that, and I had more time on my hands, and I thought, why don't I get back into that? Because I thought I was pretty good at, programming and doing that sort of thing. And then COVID happened, and then I had a whole bunch of time on my hands.
Yes.
So I started teaching myself. I started with Bash because I had started using Linux a few years before that, and I thought, there's so many things that I just wish I could just press a button and it would happen. So I started writing Bash scripts for everything that I need to do. And then eventually I taught myself Python because I thought, that's the logical next step here.
Yeah.
And before I got into Python, I sort of wrote my own yt-dl in Bash. Because I wanted to just I wrote like a live stream, not downloader, but something that would pass the live stream to MPV. So this was back before YouTube became as difficult as it was today. I don't think I could write this in Bash today, but
Right.
And then I thought, this is something I'm good at. And, I was aware of yt-dl. And then yt-dlp rolled along, and I figured, why don't I just contribute to this instead of wasting my time on my silly little scripts? So I opened a pull request, and I just kept going with it, and that's how I ended up where I am today.
That's how they get you. That first pull request. The first one's free, and then you're hooked.
Yep.
Oh, I'm involved in multiple projects with exactly the same thing. Oh, there's this one thing that annoys me about this. I'm going to go fix it. And the next thing you know, you've written a quarter of their code base, and yeah, it's just how it works.
Yep.
I must admit, I do still maintain a little bit of HTML by hand. I use Nano, not Notepad, but that part of your story really spoke to me. I still have one website that I go in and do by hand.
There's something to be said for that.
Sure.
So, yeah. Not Notepad. I don't use Notepad anymore.
Not Notepad, no.
HTML by hand.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what's the future look like for yt-dlp? You guys have any long-term plans? Are you going to get rid of some of the modules to be able to make it more maintainable, or is it just gas to the floor all the way out?
So probably the biggest undertaking that we're planning right now is to separate the extractor modules from the core project. We eventually want to move all of the extractors, that deal with the specific websites. We want to move those into their own repository or repositories, and then have the core in its own repo, and it would basically treat every extractor as if it is a plugin. You can plug them in, unplug them, and that would sort of, first it would shield the project. If any one site causes trouble for us, then that extractor repository would get, taken down or have to deal with the repercussions of that, or the core project would be fine. That's still a ways out, I think, because
that kind of a code reorganization is not trivial.
Yeah, we're dealing with a code base that goes back like about 15 years.
Yes.
And compatibility has sort of been our enemy lately. Backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
It's sort of the enemy of new ideas, and it's sort of been holding us back. So one of the struggles we face is sort of balancing backwards compatibility with implementing these new ideas.
Yeah.
We have to find a way.
What isn't?
Sorry, go ahead.
What wouldn't be backwards compatible? So like, are you talking like internal API changes that break some of your extractors?
Well, it's on the user side of things. So we tend to, never remove command line options.
Okay.
They're just deprecated and,
Forever deprecated, yes.
Yeah. And just, I think the way that you would have to operate yt-dlp would be slightly different, because it wouldn't necessarily come with all sites supported out of the box like it does now.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to, pick and choose which extractor repositories you want to add. I don't want to get into too many specifics here, because we haven't really hammered down the details of how it's going to work ourselves. So I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea. But
sure, that makes sense. So I've noticed something when you go to Google and you type in YouTube downloader, or we'll just go with that. That's what most people are going to search for. You have to go quite a few pages before you actually get to something like yt-dlp, and you first find a whole bunch of websites that will download YouTube videos for you and very likely run the yt-dlp source in the background on their server. I assume you've noticed that.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
That's interesting. That's gotta kind of annoy you guys.
It makes me wonder why. I mean, I think yt-dlp being deprioritized in the search results has got to be intentional, unless it's just some sort of, these other sites are somehow gaming the search engine optimization, what have you. But you just think you search YouTube downloader, at least YouTube DL would be the top result, if not yt-dlp.
Yeah.
So I think we've been deboosted, most likely. But it just makes you wonder, why would they want these other sites?
Some of which are serving malware. Some of which are serving malware and adware and all kinds of garbage on them.
And I mean, it just makes you wonder. And most of those sites, they are either, powered by YouTube DL, or, they're not. I don't know.
Third page. You're on the third page.
Third page, wow.
I mean, it could be worse, but yeah. Yeah, on this site, on this particular search for YouTube downloader, the GitHub is on the third page. And above you is a whole bunch of websites that I would prefer not to mess with. I mean, I'm sure some of them are legitimate and aren't going to try to eat your babies, but I'm sure some of them are serving malware if they can.
I know a big one right now is Cobalt. And I think they're fairly legit. I don't know if they show up in the search results, or if they're
also
down on the third page with us also.
I think some of it is just that the vast majority of people don't want to run a Python script. And so YouTube knows that, Google sort of knows that, and is going to direct them to the services.
I just think that they wouldn't want people using those sites at all, though. Well, that's why it's confusing to me. Is you'd think, let's send them to a GitHub page where they have to figure out how to install this thing and run it from the command line, instead of, go to a web page where they type in the URL and click a button.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess I have to wonder, are people at Google and people at YouTube sort of in the back of their mind thinking about like antitrust? And so if they manipulate the results too much, then, at some point they might get hit with some kind of antitrust lawsuit. I don't know.
Maybe, but I don't think they're worried about that from yt-dlp though.
That's probably true. That's probably way down. That's on the third page of their list of concerns.
Yeah. Though I mean, I think we are on their radar though.
I'm sure. I tell you what else you are.
You know,
what I can guarantee you are. You guys are used internally at Google. I can guarantee you guys are used internally at Google. Absolutely.
I wouldn't doubt that.
By somebody, probably multiple people, because it's such a useful tool. Yeah, which is nuts to think about.
Yeah. I think we're definitely used internally when they write their new versions of their player JavaScript to see if they can break it.
Yeah, that's likely true. So, if somebody goes to use yt-dlp and whatever they're trying to get to doesn't work, where should they go complain / send patches? What's the process?
They can always add another issue onto the issue tracker. We're 1,500 going strong. We can always use some more. As long as they're willing to submit complete verbose output, if they can give us a log with all the details we need, then feel free to open an issue on the issue tracker. That's all we ask, is just follow our issue template checklist and give us the details we need. If they have more general questions, or they don't feel like, if they feel like they can't even get to the point where they have a verbose log to give us, then they can join our Discord and ask us on there.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure and get the link to the Discord and put it in the show notes, because that'll be very interesting for folks to follow. How difficult is it to submit a patch and get it picked up?
We accept pull requests from anybody. We do ask that you follow our coding conventions, and we ask that you understand that we have a high volume of pull requests, and it might take a while for us to get to them, to review them. But yeah, anyone, if they want to add support for a site and it's not, it's not a sketchy site, nothing, DRM protected, nothing piracy related, then, we'll review it and, merge it if it's acceptable.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you guys do have kind of a list of sites that you're just not willing to support. Not piracy stuff. Mashed Potato. Mashed Potato points out, people might not want to admit that they're downloading free videos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can make a burner account on GitHub and open the pull request as, anonymous furry 420.
Oh, that's you probably have that, actually. People doing burner accounts just to complain about a site not working. That's probably a real thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then they turn into ghosts 2 days later.
Mm-hmm.
So, the account's deleted.
Never to be seen again. Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
Someone somewhere is living in shame that they had to do that. But thus is the internet. This is what we live with. So we talked about what's coming. What do you see? Like what worries you about this project? Right. I know some of the plans you have, but what's your what do you see coming that's going to be hard to deal with?
YouTube.
Just YouTube.
Mostly
in general?
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they gonna?
There's a lot of.
Are they gonna ever roll something out like DRM for all videos? That we just sort of put an end to it.
Well, they partially did already. It's not something that's been applied to all forms of all videos, but so there are different clients that can access the YouTube API. There's, the Android client, the web client, and then there's the TV client, or TV HTML5 as they call it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what yt-dlp is primarily using right now, because it's not subject to some of the restrictions and what have you that the other clients are.
Okay.
And if someone is downloading too much, if they're making too many requests with the TV HTML client, then they will get DRM only formats right now, or at least it's like an A/B test. It's not that widespread, but if they cool it on the downloading for a few days, everything will go back to normal. So it's something they're testing out right now. We don't think that it's going to be applied to any other client other than the TV HTML5 client. But we don't know. It's not like YouTube lets us know anything.
You don't have the inside line.
Yeah, exactly. But, that's sort of like their nuclear option. If they do that, then YouTube support is gone in yt-dlp and YouTube DL. I don't think they're going to do that, though. So I'm not that worried about that. I am worried, though, that it'll make the TV client useless for us, and we'll have to find another way of doing things. There's something else happening right now called proof of origin tokens. And this is what your web browser generates to prove that it's a real web browser. And this is, it's generated with JavaScript, and it goes beyond what we're capable of doing in Python. And so if we have to move to the web client, then we would need to add an actual,
more like a full-blown JavaScript parser.
Yeah, we're not going to write that in Python, so we need to add a dependency on like Dino. So that could be something that happens where if you want to download from YouTube, you also need to have Dino installed. Those are the biggest concerns right now.
Yeah. We talked a lot about YouTube, and rightfully so, right? It's as far as I know, it's the most popular video site in the world. But you guys have a bunch of other sort of backends that work. Do you have any favorites? Like, is there anything out there that you really think people should know about? Like, hey, we can download from Crunchyroll so that you can archive anime, or is there anything like that should be highlighted?
Well, Crunchyroll we can't download from anymore. They went full DRM, so that got removed. That got removed a couple months ago. It used to work.
Interesting.
What I would
interesting example I pulled out of the hat then.
Well, what I would say is, we get these questions on Discord and on the issue tracker all the time of, does it work with this site? I would say just get the URL and plug it in and see if it works. And I think more often than not, it will work. Or it'll start to work and then it'll break. And then you can report the bug to us and, it'll get fixed eventually.
Right.
But yeah, not any one particular site, but like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm surprised, at least every month that there's this site that dozens, hundreds, thousands of people use yt-dlp for that I'd never even heard of before, and then it breaks, and all these people come out of the woodwork, and it's like, wow, I've never even looked at this code before, and now I gotta fix it. So yeah, just try it with anything is what I'd say.
Yeah. Did the code base start in like Python 2? Was there a big Python 2 to Python 3 transition for this?
Yeah, and that is one of the big differences between yt-dlp and YouTube DL is YouTube DL started in, I don't know if it started before Python 3, but they have maintained compatibility going back to Python 2.6 this entire
interesting.
time. So they have all these compatibility modules that, with compat functions that will work the same in Python 2 and Python 3. And yt-dlp, after it was forked, it dropped Python 2 support pretty soon after that. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. Thank God.
Yeah.
But again, that's actually one of the reasons where I decided I'm going to contribute to yt-dlp instead of yt-dl, because I didn't want to have to deal with, maintaining compatibility going back to 2.6.
The mess that is trying to work in both versions of Python. Yeah,
right,
that's kind of ugly. Are there any skeletons like that still hidden in the code base?
Probably. We've gotten rid of a lot of them, and we've been sort of keeping on the same timeline as the PSF itself. With if they drop support for the end of life of Python 3.7, 3.8, we've dropped support for 3.7, 3.8. Right now, I think we only support 3.9 and above. So every time that happens, then we go and we try to, purge a bunch of old code,
right?
That we don't need anymore. But I'm sure there's still some lingering around that we haven't found.
Yeah. So I'm kind of remiss. I should have asked you earlier about this. This is open source. What is the license that yt-dlp is under?
So it's under the unlicensed, which is basically a fancy way of saying public domain. So when we, push code, it's just out there for anyone to use however they want, which sort of explains the proliferation of all those YouTube downloader sites that just use yt-dl and yt-dlp, because, I mean, they're free to do that if they want, but, I wouldn't use those.
I'm looking forward to the inevitable fork of this into a source available licensed business clause something.
Yeah,
probably not on the roadmap.
Probably not. No, we've thought about relicensing, but there's just really not a great solution to that problem, I think.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of like that as public domain. I feel like, anyone can use this however they want. It sort of, takes responsibility off of me, I feel like, as, this code just exists, is what I say.
Yeah.
It's not really my code, it's not our code, it's out there. So anyone can use it.
Yeah. So I was speaking, of course, very tongue-in-cheek about the idea of the relicensing, and the point with that is, like, the worst of these sites that do this, that use your code, the ones that you would really like to stop, those are the ones that don't care what the license is, right? So it would be a pointless gesture.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like they're saying, like, oh, we're powered by yt-dlp.
It'd be kind of nice, but
no, all these sites are like, look at what we can do, So
our proprietary YouTube support plugin. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it. I know how that goes. All right. Hey, so is there anything I didn't ask you about that I should have? I know this is a hard question. Just got to do set math in your head. Think about all the things we talked about and what your list of what you want to do. Is there anything we didn't cover, we didn't get to?
No, I think we touched on a lot of stuff.
Okay. You got to plug your Discord. You told people where to go to open issues and where to go to submit code. Those are the big things, I think.
Yeah, github.com/ytdlp/ytdlp. As long as you can remember those letters, it's pretty easy.
Yep.
We got the link to the Discord on our GitHub. pretty much, that's where you can download from. That's where you can get the source code from. That's our hub.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, let me ask you this before I get into the final two questions. If yt-dlp like permanently breaks with YouTube, I kind of have this feeling that there are going to be a lot of repercussions from that people don't immediately think of. Is that kind of your feeling too? Like there's a lot of, obviously these fly-by-night website services, they're going to go down, but I feel like this probably gets used in a lot of other tools. And there's a lot of places that are suddenly going to stop working if this goes down for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, I think probably the most noticeable thing is I think a lot of creators on YouTube use it to clip other videos and include them in their videos.
Yeah.
So I think if YouTube support goes away, I think there will be a lot of annoyed creators that they have to find another way, or that they can't make these videos that clip other videos and stuff like that. I think I know it's used by journalists.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's used, yeah, like you said, it's used for a lot more applications than you'd think. It's it's not just
Yeah.
someone at home, downloading a funny video they like,
Yeah, right.
So
it is that too, but there's some
right. I mean, yeah.
It's something we find with a lot of these open source projects that we talk about. There's a tail to them, right? And not everybody can see the tail. Sometimes, where all it touches things is hidden. You guys are not in quite as many places as like libcurl, where there's probably 1 billion installs, but there's a lot of things that would stop work. You would eventually notice that things would go away if yt-dlp went down, or even if just YouTube shut it down completely. Yeah, interesting stuff.
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen.
Hopefully, indeed. So I've got to ask you two final questions before we let you go, and that is, what is your favorite scripting language and text editor? I mean,
well, can I say anything other than Bash?
Based on the introduction, I thought you were going to say Notepad and HTML.
I think I've got to say Python. That's what
fair.
I write every day. So Python. An editor was the other question?
Yeah, text editor.
I like Genie or Genie. I pronounce it Genie. Geany.
I am not familiar with this one, actually.
It's really lightweight, which is why I like it. I don't like the IDEs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it has syntax highlighting that's pretty good. That's all I really ask for. So
cool. That is not one that was on my radar. I will definitely have to look into that. Very cool. All right, Mr. Bash Only, thank you so much for being here with us today. I sure appreciate you taking the time to do it, and we learned a lot about yt-dlp and kind of the history and some of the things that go on the background that we didn't know about. So thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. All right, that was Bash Only of yt-dlp, and definitely a lot of fun. And like we said, there's a tail to some of these projects that you don't really think about, but they get used a lot. May or may not realize it. We've got something really fun coming up next week. We're talking with Stefan Graber about LXC, the Linux Containers Project. Definitely looking forward to that. Then we have a couple of weeks open, and then we will be talking about Kunai, which is a Linux security product, and excited about that one too. Appreciate everybody that's here, both those that watch us live and get us on the download, and we will see you next week on Floss Weekly.